Hi, that was the C section of Squib Cakes by Tower of Power with the great David Garibaldi on drums on the original recording. So if you want to watch the full video, you can see the link in the description, and I've also added a PDF of my chart. So I will focus a little bit on the intro groove, the break, the A and the B section. But these have been well documented already, and even David Garibaldi has transcribed some of this in his books. The main point of this video is to talk about the C section. It's not a well-known groove, but it's really interesting in terms of drumming and also in terms of the timing. I know I was struggling with it at first when I started learning it, and a few of my students were also finding it very difficult. In fact, a few people have contacted me and asked me if I could explain it. So if you're only interested in the C section, you can move forward. And I also wanted to mention something about the ghost notes in the PDF. I use white note heads for the ghost notes. That's my own system. I found it much easier to read, especially with Garibaldi stuff. There's a lot of ghost notes. So visually, it was just much easier to learn it and actually eventually memorize it all using that system. So in terms of structure, we have the intro, which is 2 bars of the A groove with the great drum break, the A and the B section repeated, and the C section. So what I'll play first is the intro pickup and the first 2 bars. So if you look at the chart, you notice there's a slight difference with the bass drum pattern for the first 2 bars and the A section proper. So this is quite important when you play the ghost notes on the E hand every time. It's going to be a bit trickier for the first 2 bars as opposed to the A section, which is more linear between the left and the right. There's also an open hi-hat on the end of 1 right after the fill at the beginning, and also in this first bar is not playing the E of 3 on the snare drum. So what I want to do now is just go over some of the steps that I would recommend you nail first before you actually try and put it all together. I found that teaching it like this with that method is really efficient, and people tend to nail it much quicker. So next up is the great drum break he plays leading up to the A section. So those 2 bars are quite special for me because they actually started that project of transcribing Garibaldi and looking at other songs as well. So in that break, we need to really focus again on the control and the dynamics. And again, we're going to go over some of the steps that I think are quite useful. And I want to also point out that when you start the second bar, you notice that he's playing this quite well-known trademark of his, which is based on a Swiss Army triplet sort of sticking, but this time it's on the bass drum, between the bass drum and the right hand. And later on, we'll see this a lot in the C section between the hands. The next section is the B section. So this is a nice groove as well. We are playing a really nice ostinato pattern on the right cymbal. We have displaced backbeats on the end of 2 and also 4 and on the snare drum. We have hi-hats running through it with the left foot. And we've got some connecting fills as well, a 2/4 bar to look out for. And also we need to choke the cymbal. The right cymbal needs to be choked right before one of the 2/4 bars. We only have one quarter note to do this before we go back into the fill with hi-hats playing eighth notes. So what I'm going to do again, I'm going to go over some of the steps, the highlights of that pattern, and just trying to nail again the dynamics and try and place everything properly. So the last 2 eighth notes I played at the end of that clip was the start of the C section. This will only happen once at the very beginning, and obviously from the 3rd bar onwards we'll play something slightly different on beat 1. So let me play it from the 2/4 bar, and I'll play also about 4 bars of the solo section after the C section. So what makes the C section difficult in my view is twofold. We have 2 bars. The first bar is quite syncopated. It follows the actual pattern of the horns, but the groove is basically very similar to a lot of Garibaldi grooves, very intricate, sort of like, again, Swiss Army triplet sort of sticking, that sort of concept that I mentioned earlier on the right cymbal and the snare drum. And the second bar is the one that actually confuses a lot of people, because we have basically a displacement. The backbeat is not on 2 and 4, and that's the thing. When we listen to it, we just really think of it as a regular funk groove, really, nothing special about it. But actually, the displacement is on the end of 2 and 4 on the snare drum. And we also have a bass drum on the ends of 1 and 3, plus a couple more bass drums and some ghost notes. So the beat is actually very easy to play, but it's not what it seems. So I'm going to play it, I'm going to count through it, and I would exhort you to count as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I just played the second bar with all the notes, including the ghost notes. If you find it easier at first, remove the ghost notes or even the bass drums. What we need to hear is really the backbeat, the displacement, and make sure you count. Something I like to do with counting as well is to count 16th notes first, then 8th notes, and then just quarter notes to really feel the pulse. So for the first bar, we're going to have a similar trick in a way. We're going to play 8th notes on the bell of the right cymbal and play all the backbeats. This is what I like about also the notation. We're going to play the black note heads, basically, the main notes on the snare drum, and then obviously the bass drums as well. So in that way, we can already play both patterns very easily, both bars. And we're going to play through and actually try and hear that sort of tension between the first one and the release of the second, but with that twist again, with that displacement. So I'll play this first, and then we're going to start getting into the intricacies of the first bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. The next step would be to add the ghost notes on the snare drum. The other thing we need to pay attention to is this switch between the bell of the cymbal for the first bar and a softer sound in the second bar, which I do with French grip and with thumb on top. So this switch is quite important because later on when we play, this happens on the bar line, so it's very useful, sort of counteract a little bit the effect of the syncopation of the first bar and the displacement. We can rely on that switch on the bar line. So the next thing we're going to do is to focus more on the left hand. I'm going to use the pull-out accent and the control stroke, which is basically the ability to play soft to loud or loud to soft on the snare drum. And again, try and make sure we have a great articulation. Then we focus on the right cymbal on its own. And I'll keep running the eighth notes with the left foot through the whole thing. I'll play a couple of bars of just the right hand first bar. And then what we do is basically keep that right hand only in the first bar, but include the full second bar. So we can now put it all together. We're going to keep the hi-hats running through it, playing eighth notes with the left foot. And not only we need to have a great articulation with each limb, but we need to have very good togetherness as well. That's going to be crucial. And the left hand, the ability to play the ghost notes really quietly to make that groove work. And the final thing is to have a look at the transition from the 2/4 bar. After the 2/4 bar, we're playing one hand on the hi-hat and the bass drum. The hi-hats obviously will run through the whole thing. And we need to make sure we have a really good transition on beat 2. We need to switch to the bell of the cymbal, get that sound straight away, plus getting also the articulation right away so we can nail that groove. And remember, that groove is basically following the ensemble. It's very much following the horn section. So the articulation is really crucial to make this work. I'll play it now from the 2/4 bar. What I've done is basically program a loop with the slowdown software to play it from the 2/4 bar and then repeat. So no transition to the guitar solo. But I would encourage you to have a look at the guitar solo and look at the chart. There's some great gems in terms of groove, variations, backbeat displacements as well, and some wicked fills in that section. I hope you found this video useful. I just explained the way I'm doing it. Obviously, that's using my own technique and my own interpretation. Definitely not claiming that's exactly what he plays. But I would encourage you to listen to the early recordings of Tower of Power. I know he was also playing with traditional grip, which probably changed a little bit his approach. And also a little anecdote, one of my students met David Garibaldi in a plane one day in Europe, and he actually asked him to look at the chart, and especially the C section, and he approved and actually signed it. Later on, sat down with him and had a great chat. So he's a great drummer, but also a great guy. So take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.